Welcome to Pillosphy, production of the Counseling Center in Portsmouth, Ohio, one of the first and most widely affected areas of the opioid epidemic. I am Senior Director Max Lyles, here today with a couple of friends. Billie Taylor.
Hello, Max.
Hey, Billie, welcome. And Joshua Sherman, welcome.
Hello, Max.
Today we're going to talk about the overdose crisis, how that's sort of been a national problem, something that's certainly affected our area. We'll share some statistics, some of the things we're doing in our local strategic response to that kind of stuff. But before we get into all that, we'll qualify our experts here. Billie is the team leader of the quick response team at the Counseling Center. Give us a little bio about what you've been doing, how you got involved in the field, and those kind of things.
Well, I got involved in the field because I'm a recovering addict and I have almost 15 years clean.
That's a long time. Decade and a half, dude.
Yes.
Wow.
And I went through treatment at Stepping Stones, and I knew that I wanted to help other people.
Yeah.
That was just like me, because I lived here my whole life and I never knew that there was a way to get out.
Sure.
From addiction. Even though I lived here and Stepping Stones was right around the corner, you know, and I just didn't know what the place was. So when I finally reached out for help, I was sent there, and I got clean through there, and I wanted to work there. So
Yeah.
I got a job there my first year being clean, and I worked there for 6.5 years.
Wow.
And then
What all were you doing, like, in that 6.5 years? Kind of what all jobs did you have?
I was a residential house monitor, and then I was a transporter, and then I was a case manager, and then I became a counselor in 2012.
Like a little bit of everything, you know what I mean?
That's a lot.
Yes.
That's like a little bit of everything.
Yes. So then I ventured out and worked at a few other facilities, but I stayed working in the AOD field because I always wondered what my passion was or what my purpose was in life, and I believe it's to be a cheerleader for others who was struggling just like me, to, you know, to build them up, to let them see that there's hope.
Sure.
So I came back to the counseling center almost 2 years ago, and the QRT team leader job came up and
Just fell in your lap.
fell in my lap.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And I'm very outgoing in the recovery community, and I do a lot of stuff outside of, you know, our job field.
Sure.
To help people in recovery. And when that job presented itself, I was very excited because, you know, we see so many people that don't make it from overdoses, being a recovering addict and working in this field, and it's very detrimental. So to be given this position and to be able to help somebody is a blessing.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think that's you know, you're a perfect person for the job, like to go out there and be in the community, and you know, you're the best, man. Appreciate
Thanks.
you. So thanks, Billie, and Josh, dude, qualify yourself. You're the expert on the other side of things. Right?
Yeah, so it's going to be difficult to qualify myself as an expert. However, I'm a firefighter and a paramedic.
Sure.
And I've been doing that for about 20 years now. Mm-hmm. I started locally as a volunteer, and then in Cincinnati for 5 years, and then I've been here in Portsmouth for 13, and have been worked my way up through the ranks to captain.
Recently captain.
Recently
Congrats.
captain,
Cheers.
So, I've been doing emergency response for the better part of my life now.
Yeah.
20
years is a long time too. I'm like 20 years. I'm the least experienced one at the table. We got 15
people,
and 20, dude. I gotta catch up.
And so what kind of happened with me is as I went through my career, there were a lot of new things that I was exposed to.
Yeah, sure.
I bet. So a house fire is one thing. It's pretty easy to deal with.
Right.
You put water on it and it goes away, right?
Okay.
Put water on a medical patient or someone with a substance abuse disorder, they don't go away.
Right.
And what was happening to me is it was nothing as kind of where you got into it and you wanted to help people. I just wanted to help myself. And so we started experiencing these overdoses, and I started to become very jaded.
Yeah.
And I started to experience a lot of like emotional type things that I couldn't get my hands around, and I was so young that I just didn't know how to work through those. And I became angry and frustrated and blah, blah, blah. So when I left Cincinnati and I got to Portsmouth, we didn't run EMS, and then bang, here we go, we're running EMS again. I start building this
back
program,
in the saddle,
and I start to experience it again as an older, person, or more of a man, I guess, more developed, having a family. And I said, I can't do this again. So what do I do? How do I get through it?
Yeah.
And obviously it's a issue it's not really going to go away. It'll transform into a lot of different animals, but it's not going away. And so I started, I called you.
Yeah.
I started working out with the recovery community, and I started to try to figure out a way to see them not as this problem that was in front of me every third day, but as human beings.
That's and I think that's a story worth telling. It was like that sort of like first soft opening post like COVID shutdown. There were no seats in the coffee shop because you just had to go in and get your coffee and leave. And so I'm standing in the coffee shop and Josh is in there with the other guys. And I was like, dude, what's up? And he was like, man, I got a problem. And the way he framed the question was like, can you put me in contact with drug addicts in recovery? And I was like, yeah, man. Yeah, I know some people, dude. So, yeah, you came down 10 a.m. class at the Hawk.
Yeah.
And that was, talk a little bit about that experience. I think that was a pretty cool.
So I came in and I had expectations, as we all do.
Sure.
And my expectations were that I was going to come in and be this white knight and this hero to the community.
Sure.
I was not.
Yeah, they let you have it that day.
They didn't trust me, which I didn't understand.
Right.
It's like I'm the good guy. I'm a fireman. Everybody loves a fireman.
Yeah, everybody loves a guy in uniform. You know what I mean?
That didn't work. And then I had talked with Max. I'm like, I'd love to be able to work out, and then we'll have a conversation. And this conversation, I'll turn it around. I'll make them. Yeah. And they did.
And when you came in, I just told him, I said, hey, this is my friend Josh, and he's just going to work out with us today. And so then we work out. You're on a team with a couple dudes, right? And
Great
then,
workout.
they get after it in there. You know what I mean? And then afterwards, like, all right, powwow, let's sit down. It was like, Josh is a firefighter, EMS. You know what I mean? Like, tell him about what you do. And so we went into all this kind of thing. Yeah.
And it didn't go as I had expected, but it was probably one of the best learning moments of my entire life, and not just with working with people in that community and with substance abuse issues, but like, man, it like stripped me down to a point where I'm like, I need to look at myself. Like, I think I'm the problem.
Yeah.
You know? And then I'm acting just like all these other first responders, and maybe we're part of the problem. And that turned something that I thought I was going to come in and champion, no, that turned me into somebody that's like, I need to understand empathy.
Yeah.
I need to understand what it means to have an addiction and what kind of what that does to your life.
Yeah.
And thankfully, in dealing with personal things in my life where now I'm having to deal with a loved one that has an addiction. I would have never had the tools required. I would have gone crazy. So I mean, this has been a very valuable experience for me.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the important thing is like, whether you're a professional that touches the field just by way of your job detail, or whether you're a person who is like very deeply called based on personal experience to work with the recovery population, is like, this is something that is such an invasive problem, such a chronic problem, long lasting, transcends all race barriers, income barriers, state lines, everything, right? So since 1999, there have been 1 million people overdosed in the United States of America. In the last calendar year, that number's topped 100,000. So for all the, we're all local to Ohio here, so that's like filling up the horseshoe in Columbus with people that have just lost their lives in the last year in the United States of America. And then too, you talk about a real national issue with those kind of numbers, but also Scioto County is one of those counties that's kind of been at the top of that pile since sort of the inception of the opioid epidemic and those kind of things. When you hear those kind of statistics, what's some of the stuff that comes to mind, Billy?
It's just really scary to know that there's that many people that's lost their life. Two, that some of them is like people we grew up with, but it's also reassuring that, like, we can come together. Like you said, it doesn't matter. Like, when I first met with you and met with Josh and met with Jonathan to take on this position, that to see the other people that are not like us
Right.
actually want to help now.
Yeah.
Because before, like Josh said, a lot of people were jaded and they didn't want to help. And, you know, so it's actually a good thing to see that it's came together and people can work together with the community, with law enforcement, with the firefighters, and everybody has a common goal, and it's to try to save somebody's life or to get them the help they need to save their own life.
Sure. Yeah, and that's an interesting thing, and we'll get into kind of like how QRT works or whatever. But talking about like preservation of life, you know what I mean? That's like very much EMS. You know what I mean? Like very much EMS, right?
That's the whole point of having a fire department.
Yeah, but then an issue like this that can be so polarizing, right? It's like it's one of those things of, and that sort of like being jaded to things or getting, you know, having being affected emotionally or negatively impacted by, you know, death or despair or whatever. It's like that happens on both sides of the aisle as well. Absolutely. I think, yeah. But then what's a reaction to some of those statistics when you hear them, man? Because that's a lot of people.
They're staggering, and it is a lot of people, and I think, you know, just locally, we all have multiple stories of people that we know, that we went to school with, people in our family, that you just get a phone call. It's like, hey, they died last night. Yeah. So, you know, there's still a part of this job that I do that you still need to be able to operate. Right. So you need to get past that, you know, I'll deal with that emotion later and let me get to a point where I can function. Right. Because it's emergencies. Yeah. And so the way I look at it is like, it's not like, what can we do to help? It's like we have a responsibility. Yeah. You know, if fires were killing that many people, we would step back and be like, what are we doing wrong? Like, we're not getting these fires out. Yeah. But when it comes to cardiac related events, we've developed entire new protocols. We've got all this equipment, and we're gonna, you know, crack down on people having heart attacks. Then it comes to substance abuse disorders, and they're like, look, we don't have time for that right now. Because you're absolutely right. There's nothing sexy that you can put in there to fix the problem. Right. Because it's not the fentanyl. There's a whole gambit of issues that surround the substance abuse disorders and recovery communities that goes way beyond just the drug of choice. And that's what we're looking at. That's what we're battling with.
And I think too, that's kind of where talking about, you know, an EMS person responding to an overdose is very much in the life preservation vein, but then dealing with the other stuff. It's like EMS aren't trained to be behavioral health providers or counselors or to address those like long-term needs, right? Yeah. Which is one of the reasons why I think like this partnership is so cool, right? QRT, yeah, it's because you guys can do your thing and then we can do our thing, right? And we'll get into a little bit more about that as far as the statistics and things like that. You mentioned fentanyl. And so now, like, talking about the timeline of the opioid epidemic, this has been going on since the mid-'90s, right, with the large influx of OxyContin overprescription of those kind of drugs. So you think about that in kind of three waves. So first wave is OxyContin, overprescription of pain medication, right? Second wave in 2012, the white knights come in and, hey, we're going to shut down all the pill mills. Right, and that's going to fix everything.
They did a great job.
Yeah, and they did that. They accomplished that. Right, those things they're all gone. They're all gone. And then it opens the door. Heroin comes in. Right, large influx of heroin comes in, and then now that just by the nature of supply and demand and the way that street drugs and those kind of operations work is that now we've got a large influx of fentanyl, carfentanil, which is a lot more potent and deadly than some of those other drugs. Right. Yes. So people are still using opiates, whether they be prescription opiates or street opiates or whatever, right? But then, you know, we've got all these contributing factors. How have you guys seen, and whoever wants to start, how have you guys seen sort of the progression of things change within your job, sort of from OxyContin to heroin to fentanyl, carfentanil?
Well, on our end, it's the withdrawal effects. Yeah. OxyContin withdrawals was super bad, but now with the heroin, the carfentanil, and all of that, it's people aren't just withdrawing off one substance anymore. There's so much stuff put in it that it's hard to like get in there and help them because you're not combating one thing.
Yeah.
You're combating
Moving target.
So that aspect of it is a lot harder. And then on the QRT side of it, for me, it's when you see somebody who's overdosing or you get there on a scene, it's like heroin or oxys. It took one Narcan, and it was right back.
Right.
And it's taking way more now because there's way more substance in what they think they're doing one drug.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Yeah. It's wild to think to me that, like, honestly, one of the things that you could do right now to fix the problem would be bring all the pill mills back. That's wild to think about.
It's very crazy, but it's sad, but it's kind of truthful.
It's wild to think about, and it's like well, no, that is not
not
what we want. But it's like that's a wild thing to think about. Is that when things were so bad in the early 2000s locally, that
there weren't as many people dying then.
That it has escalated so much, and that's the thing too. I guess from my perspective is like, I'm a person in long-term recovery as well. I got clean in 2012. Back then, it was like you could name a person. You knew someone that's like, oh yeah, I knew such and such that died from a drug overdose, and it was usually some sort of combination of drugs. You know what I mean? Of like, you know, but now it's like every other like weekday, 3 days, a batch comes in and just like people die, right? So. Yeah, it's so much more like aggressive at this point, it seems like, you know. Absolutely. Which I think, you know, it's one of the reasons why our treatment has to be as well. What about you in the EMS side? What are some things that have changed over the course of the last couple decades
with the progression
throughout your entire career?
Yeah, so when we started with, you know, when I started running emergency medical services, it was in the early 2000s, so pre-2005, and it was methamphetamine. Oh. And so that was wild.
Yeah,
you know? And,
different kind of wild.
Yeah, it was, and so when I went to Cincinnati, and you know that's where I operated. It was a different socioeconomic area.
Okay.
And so we saw some of it, but most of it was, you know, not. It just wasn't as affluent. Like it wasn't.
I got you.
There was an overdose every now and then, and so I come back into Portsmouth, and it was at around. 2000 and I can't even remember now. 2010, 11. So then they, you know, cracked down on the pill mills, and that was awesome. You know, it was like people were, and then you know, there's still a need. They didn't fix anything. The problem isn't the pill mills. You know, the problem isn't the heroin. There's a lot deeper to like an onion. Yeah. And so when you get a government agency in here to fix something, that's how it gets fixed. They take away a supply. But
that's the whole philosophy of the war on drugs, right? And why that has been such a failure is like, oh, we're gonna fix the supply issue. And that's where they go out. We secure the borders. We crack, you know, create mandatory minimums. We like do all these things. We're going to get tough on crime. You know what I mean?
I can say from experience, watching someone who struggles with an addiction, you tell them, no, you can't have that, or you take that from them. They will find all kinds of creative ways to get that again.
Sure.
Because they're just filling a hole, and they're filling it with whatever.
Right.
But they didn't fix the hole. And that was what we ran into. And then we had the heroin, we had the fentanyl. What it changed for us is we had to develop new strategies to, you know, reverse the overdose or to provide life-saving measures right now. And that was like our main objective, because that's what we're really there for.
Well, yeah, because, and the other thing too, like with that being said, you can't treat a dead drug addict. There's no effective treatment for a dead drug addict. So it's like if you guys don't do that job.
You got to get that first.
Yeah, we got to do that first.
And that's what we did. Yeah. We developed new protocols, and there's nothing new. It's not like we came up, you know, we're not doctors. We're not geniuses. We're dumb firemen. But we did look at it and say, well, what's the problem?
Sure.
How, you know, we can't get all, well, they're not breathing.
Right.
So we're like, well, that's easy. Like, we can breathe for them. I can intubate them. We have a lot of tools in our bag that we can use. We just weren't using them because, you know, it's that, well, you give them Narcan and then stand around and wait and see what happens.
Yeah.
Well, so what if it doesn't work? And it's just problem solving. And we got through it, and I think we've developed some great protocols to deal with a whole plethora of different drugs that could be in a person's system, and do what we can to get them to some kind of definitive care.